Okay, when I look at these figures or I start thinking about a design, I'm putting it in terms of what can I get the most of my geometry from that profile, and then if I have symmetry, what's going to be the best use of that axis of symmetry. So looking at this, the bottom shape is pretty good. Don't necessarily have to include the corners, but probably will. And then the angles cut. So if we do that shape, again we're in 2 decimal place inch. One of the other things we'll do in this video is look at the cold rolled steel, one required. And that terminology can vary from print to print, considering these figures have been around since probably the 3rd edition in the 1940s. Probably not going to see them change anytime soon, or if they do, they'll go over to metric. So let's fly this out of the way, and we'll start picking up our geometry. So new, and we're going to stay with the part, and I want to be on the top plane. Again, it's not necessary that your geometry matches exactly, or the view doesn't have to match exactly the geometry. Yeah, we want that pretty close. So since I have symmetry, and this is going to be horizontal, I'm going to set it to centerline, horizontal, infinite length. And that gives me a starting point. And we'll go ahead and set that out. My preference is to draw 1/2. And we'll go ahead and create that shape. Alright, so pretty straightforward up to this point, and then I have to make a decision. Am I going to include the arc all the way around, in which case I draw the line, I bring the line back to the starting point, it switches over to an arc, and I can generate that full segment. So if I were to mirror all of this, this arc would mirror on top of itself, so it's not something I really want to include. But if I window pick and get everything in the mix, I can come back and select the arc, which effectively deselects it, and then when I tell it to mirror, I have enough geometry to go ahead with it. Alright, so we bring that one around. We're going to check for tangency up here, but no tangency down on the lower. And then we're ready to start applying some dimensions. Alright, so let's go with a few of the smaller ones. We have 1.5, and then the overall. And so the thing of note here is that that first dimension kind of scales the whole drawing. Keep it in the same like aspect ratio or same ratio, but make the adjustments. So 2 inch 300, and then we have a depth of 0.26, so 260. Now we'll go with the overall of 4.12. And full radius for 0.78, so clearance. And then we have the choice of the 0.46 or the 0.3. We'd have to decide which is the more critical. So if I go with the 0.46 and then try to come back and apply the 0.3, this is where it's going to give me that make dimension driving or leave dimension driving. If we make it driving, it'll be in place, but it's not something that edits because the 0.46 has a higher priority, and it's the one that's going to control the dimension. Okay, 0.19, so our relations, about 1 inch 900, our relations have precedent in this case because it was mirrored, because we built out that geometry. I don't necessarily need all of the dimensions. I can verify them, but doesn't mean I necessarily have to include them. Alright, so the 1.12. Next choice will be, is this going to go contour and region, or we'll just go ahead and extrude it up. So if I extrude it up to the first level, then I can reuse most of the geometry. And this is going to go 0.76, so 760. and that gives us our first level, and then we can open up a new sketch, and then I'm just going to control select. If I pick the whole face, I'm going to get every piece of geometry, and that's not exactly what I want, but I do have to be a little careful in the selection. Let's go ahead and pull those back. No, it's not a midpoint. And then we'll pick up the line, connect the two endpoints, make it vertical, and then I just need a dimension, which looks like 0.94, 940, and then let's go ahead and extrude that out. Alright, so a couple of choices here on the dimension. We can do the math, 1 inch 500 minus 760, or I could possibly just draw on this sketch on the bottom and extruded it through. Positive into a positive is no net gain as long as the merge result is on. Or I can offset from surface, pick the lower surface, which was where would have needed to sketch it, and this becomes 1.5, so we can keep our overall. When I reverse, then it extends through and comes up with the 0.74, hopefully, of that shape. So let's go ahead and generate it, and 0.74 is what's left. Alright, so that was one method. As I mentioned, let's go ahead and accept that. I decide that I really need to put that on the bottom. For whatever reason, I can right click. Next to edit sketch is edit sketch plane. Right now it's showing me the face that it's on. If I pick a new face, if it's capable, it will pick that sketch up and place it on the bottom. So if we extrude, now I'm just 1.5. I don't have to do anything special with the offsets or the from, and we'll end up with that geometry. Alright, so if I draw the two triangles, then I can cut the corners off. The other thing is, if I wanted to make this an open profile, it does have to be continuous. I can't have one line segment and one line segment and think that those are going to be able to compete. There's only one profile allowed. So I selected the line, I selected the edge, Control Select gave me, or that selection gave me the midpoints. If I were to come back and make those horizontal, then as this stretches and shrinks, they should move together. So a different way of applying symmetry. And we have a 30-degree angle. And the depth goes to 0.44. Alright, so we'll go ahead and cut extrude. And the arrow shows us the side to cut and the direction. And we're going to make it through all. Alright, and then it defaults to through all both, even though it's not there. So in most cases, that through all both would cause a couple of minor problems with there not being any geometry out there, but with the open profile, it's kind of a default. So I'm going to save this before we go into the materials. And so this is 6.56, and save. Alright, so for the material, we pick a cold rolled. I look down through here, A36, plain carbon steel. We can find something a little bit closer. So when I edit the material, we're going to get the list. And cold rolled steel is typically 1018. So 1015 cold drawn, stress strained is extra. 1020 is cold rolled, so if we just wanted the piece and then appearance of polished steel, well, maybe after it's machined, even the cold rolled comes in with a little bit of scale on it. 1045, and so 1010 to about, and 1018 would be the hot rolled, and then 1020 for the cold rolled. So if I apply that and then close, color changes a little bit. I don't have the real view turned on, which would probably be a good time to take a look at our view settings. If I turn the real view graphics on, it gives a little bit more I'm not real fond of the shadows and the reflections. Ambient inclusion puts a little more shadow on it. Perspective, well, problem with perspective, let's look at this from the top. You kind of see that little hint of the segments of the circles look more conical. Yeah, that's a little annoying. So in the design phase, I turn all of those items off. Cartoon is kind of cool, but again, it's one of those, yeah, pass. Alright, but the whole purpose was to get the material so that when we come over to our evaluate and go to our mask properties, I have density of 0.29 pounds per cubic inch, so this weighs just under 2 pounds, and the volume of just under 7 cubic inches. So one of the things with mass properties is a lot of our physics works a little better in the metric system. So we can override, and that wasn't really what I was looking for. So let's go to options. And the thing to keep in mind, if I use these custom settings, it may affect items elsewhere. So if I go to grams and to cubic millimeters and then hit OK, I can get my information, but then other measurements, other locations where we're using those dimensions may also be affected. So after I get that information, I want to come back and use the document settings, and then if it's something that I really want to keep, this would be where I'd switch over to millimeters, grams, and seconds. And then when I go into the mass properties, I get those same values. So it just depends. Manufacturing is going to be in inches, then we would probably leave. And the other thing of note is that just because the part document is in millimeters doesn't mean when we take it into the drawing that it has to stay in millimeters. It will go over to whatever the document properties and units are for that part and for that drawing document.